Hello again. I'd like to welcome you to part two of my Cruising with Pets video designed for people who are cruising on inland waters. This video is aimed particularly at people who are doing local coastal cruising around the United States, inland water cruising, Great Lakes, of course, and some of the major waterways. People who are taking weekend trips or week-long trips with their pets. It's pretty easy. There's not a whole lot to it when you're cruising with pets on inland waters. You're used to taking your pet, throwing him aboard your sailboat or your powerboat, and heading out for a day. And if you decide to take a cruise for a weekend or a week, it's not much difference. You just load them on the boat again and go. I'm just trying to provide you with a little insight into some things to be prepared for, things that might happen, things that you might encounter. If you happen to be on the west coast of the United States, there's some material that might be additional material that might be of value to you that I will have in a handout available on my Captain Dr. Dave website. That is supplemental information for the Seven Seas U SSCA presentation of my Cruising with Pets class. There's some supplemental information for West Coast cruisers that you might want to take a look at and possibly download and print out. In the part one of this uh, inland cruising presentation, I have already covered a few items that you may want to take with you. I've also covered some information on crossing borders, whether it's the Canada-U.S. border or Mexico-U.S. border. And I've also discussed some local and regional dangers that you may face while you're out cruising. So moving along, we're going to talk here a little bit about parasites, which are always a threat, no matter where you travel. Parasites are a threat in your own backyard. So it's something to at least be aware of, and this is not something that is necessary, unique to cruising at all. It's just something that you should be aware of. With heartworms in particular, your best bet is to assume they're everywhere. Now, there are a lot of areas in the United States where heartworms are not an issue, a lot of areas in Canada where heartworms are not particularly an issue. But around the Great Lakes, they are a big issue. I practiced for about 20 years up in the Saginaw Bay region of the Great Lakes area up in Michigan. And I saw far more heartworms up there than I've seen since I've been practicing in Florida for the past several years. And I think it is a major problem in a lot of places, particularly along the major river valleys in the United States, the Ohio, the Mississippi, the Missouri Valley, um, around the Great Lakes Basin, and the St. Lawrence Seaway Basin. The heartworms are a major issue in the northern part of the country, and they can kill your dog. They can kill your cat. Usually they will kill a dog quite slowly unless you happen to be in an area where they're extremely thick and your dog is not on any preventative. Cats are a different story. Cats are an aberrant host. They are not a normal host for heartworms, so they are a little different critter here as far as dealing with heartworms. They're very, very difficult, next to impossible to diagnose in a cat. And not only that, but we don't have any treatment for them in cats. And they're deadly in cats very often. Most of the time, the only clue you have that your cat has heartworms is when it suddenly drops over dead. A lot of the time, that's the only warning that an owner has, and so it's worthwhile to put your cat on heartworm preventative also. So mosquitoes are everywhere. You should treat both dogs and cats for heartworm. Keep them on, and this is not a treatment, this is a preventative, but keep them on preventative medication every month, preferably year round. This disease is virtually 100% preventable. There are some cases of resistant heartworms out there, but not very many, and I will give you some insight as to which products are better than others here. But for the most part, any of them are good. Okay, if you're using a heartworm product, you're probably not going to have to worry about heartworms. We get far more failure of heartworm products due to owners not giving them or forgetting to give them or giving them improperly than we do from breakthrough infections from the failure of the product. And there are a number of products on the market to prevent heartworms that have multiple actions. You spend more for them, but you get far more for them when you buy the products that have multiple multiple actions in addition to heartworm prevention. And here's a picture of some of the products on the market. My favorite has always been Sentinel, which is a product that contains a heartworm preventative and that heartworm preventative is the same preventative that is in Interceptor. Okay, so as far as heartworm prevention, those two products are equal. In addition, both of those products will get hookworm and whipworm and roundworm, so they're excellent preventatives for intestinal parasites also. Basically everything except tapeworm. They are excellent. The difference between them is that Sentinel also contains a birth control product for fleas, so you get some pretty good flea control with Sentinel, assuming that the animal that is on Sentinel is the only animal in the household, or that any of the other animals in the household are on a flea preventative also. It will work quite well for flea prevention. The other product here that you see is Revolution with an asterisk beside it down at the bottom. That is a topical, easy to put on, easy to apply to your cat. You can count on Revolution as being a pretty good heartworm preventative and very easy to use because it is a topical. And in addition to having heartworm prevention effect, it also has some effect on fleas and also some on ear mites and some minor intestinal protection. But for the most part, Revolution's a pretty good heartworm prevention also. HeartGuard over at the far left in dogs is a pretty good product. It is it makes some claims when you get the HeartGuard Plus. It makes some claims for getting hookworm and roundworm. It is okay at that. It is not great. It's not as good, as far as I'm concerned. It's not as good as the product that's in Interceptor and Sentinel, but it's an okay product as far as heartworm prevention. It works excellent. Okay, it's a great heartworm preventative. And if you've heard rumors about collies and shelties and that sort of thing being sensitive to HeartGuard, if you give it in the proper dose in the commercial package and don't try to fake it with some off-the-wall horsewormer or whatever, HeartGuard is extremely safe even in collies and shelties and any of those kinds of sensitive dogs. The Advantage Multi on the right, this is the cat version of Advantage Multi. There's also a dog version, and as far as I'm concerned, it should have an asterisk beside it because I feel that it's one of the best heartworm preventatives on the market. It is acknowledged, pretty much almost proven, that it is a notch above all of the other products at preventing heartworm. Okay, and I won't go into the details of it, but I was skeptical when I heard it from the company that produces it, from Bayer, one of the representatives at a conference. So I went to another seminar and inquired of somebody who wasn't a representative for them, and that person also admitted that that Advantage Multi does have an advantage over the others as far as heartworms having any kind of natural resistance. The difference between them is really almost negligible, but if you want to use the product that has proven itself to be almost fail-safe at preventing heartworm, Advantage Multi is the product of choice for that, and it is available in both a dog version and a cat version. It is a topical, very easy to use. Put it on between the shoulder blades once each month, and you get hookworm, whipworm, roundworm, heartworm, and flea prevention all in one single product. An excellent product that has a pretty good safety record, easy to apply, an excellent product. So I can't say enough good things about Advantage Multi. It's been around long enough now for me to have a pretty good confidence in its effects at everything that it claims it does. Down in the lower right hand corner you see Trifexis. It too is an excellent heartworm preventative. I got a big question mark on it for other reasons here. It contains the same heartworm ingredient that is in Sentinel and Interceptor. So in addition to getting excellent heartworm protection, it also provides hookworm, whipworm, and roundworm protection. So from that point of view, it's an excellent product. But in addition to Mebolarone, which is the heartworm preventative, it also contains spinosad, which is the active ingredient that is in Comfortis, which is an oral flea tablet that we give. And Comfortis is quite a safe product. It's an excellent product for flea prevention, given once a month. It works orally against fleas. A very good product. The problem with spinosad is that it has been linked to seizures in dogs, and it doesn't do what we call, it doesn't cause seizures, but what it does is it makes it It does what we call lowers the seizure threshold in patients who have a tendency to have seizures. So if you have a pet who has a tendency to have seizures, it may make it more likely that he's going to have a seizure. If you have a pet that may have a tendency to have seizures and you are not yet aware of that tendency, Trifexis may surprisingly, using Trifexis may surprisingly bring on a seizure in effect. So that is the reason I have a question mark in front of on the Trifexis product, is because there is some potential here for a negative side to this product. If you have used it for a couple of years and not had any and not had any problems with it, you are probably fine. Okay, stay with it. Probably not an issue. If you've only recently started using it and you're going to step onto your boat with your pet and take off for 2-3 weeks, it may be questionable whether it's the product for you if you're going to be heading off into places. If you have a pet who has a tendency to have seizures and your veterinarian was not aware of it and put your pet on Trifexis, not a good choice. So you may want to reconsider. But all in all, Trifexis is a pretty good product, a pretty effective product, except for that little disclaimer about the possible seizures, and that is something that you should be aware of. It is not the dangerous product that, in my opinion anyway, it is not the dangerous product that it has been portrayed as by a number of screaming loonies on the internet. So, but, just so that you are aware, it does have, there are some potential issues with Trifexis. So, in my recommendation as far as starting well before you leave applies to any product that you use on your pet, whether it's tablets, whether it's anti-inflammatories, whether it's flea or tick medication, or any kind of medication that you use on your pet. Do not go to the doctor and get a brand new prescription and then leave 2 days later to go on an extended cruise. Okay, anything that your pet is using should have a proven track record over an extended period of time that it works and your pet doesn't have any problem with it before you decide to head off and go on an extended vacation with this product and your pet along. So for fleas, if you have just one pet and you keep that pet aboard your boat, you're probably not going to have any problem with fleas. That's pretty much that simple. If you don't bring them aboard, they're not going to be there. If, on the other hand, you have multiple pets and you've already had your pets aboard the boat on a regular basis, there's a good possibility you may already have fleas aboard your boat. So fleas are difficult. There's no getting around it. And I live here in Florida where fleas are king. And anything and everything is done by some people to try and deal with fleas, and many people have grown to simply accept them and live with them. I don't know which situation you might be in, but they can be frustrating and difficult to deal with. So your best bet is prevention, if at all possible. And the best way to prevent fleas is to check your pets frequently. And that means I would translate that into during flea season, which in the North Country might run from April through October or November. In the southern part of the country, it is all year round. In Canada, it might only be from June through August. I don't know, but keep in mind, if you keep your pet aboard the boat when you are cruising, you're probably not going to have any fleas. If you are meticulous about flea prevention at home, you're probably not going to have any fleas. But my key is check your pets frequently, at least 2 or 3 times a week. Just look for a flea. All you're doing is looking for a flea anywhere on your pet. Up over the top of the rump is an excellent place to go through the hair and see if there's one there. That's where they're usually most plentiful. Roll your pet over on its back and look between the hind legs on the belly. That's where they're usually most visible if there are very many present. But just check. If you find one, you probably have a flea problem. Okay, if you find several, you definitely have a flea problem. And the key here is to use effective preventatives, and I should also have on here use safe preventatives. There are a lot of preventatives on the market. The over-the-counter products are not proven. They are not necessarily safe. A lot of times they are quite effective. You just have to be worried about the safety component. Advantage and Advantix are excellent products. I'm not a big fan of Advantix because it is dangerous and potentially toxic to cats, and it's easy for an owner to grab it by accident when they're intending to use Advantage on their cat. I've had that many a time, and we end up with hospitalizing the cat who's having central nervous system signs from having been treated with Advantix, and $800 to $1,000 later, the owner's taking the cat home and lucky to have it alive. So try to avoid that mistake. Therefore, I prefer Advantage for fleas rather than Advantix. Frontline, on the other hand, is safe in both cats and dogs, has a pretty good activity for most purposes against fleas, and is as good as anything else on the product for ticks. Sentinel is an excellent product for preventing fleas. The problem with Sentinel is that if you have multiple pets, every pet in the household really needs to be on the flea ingredient that's in Sentinel for it to work very effectively. So if they're not, and the flea ingredient that's in Sentinel is the product called Program. Lufenuron is the active ingredient in Program, which is the flea ingredient all by itself without heartworm medication. So if you're not going to undertake a program using Lufenuron, then you're probably better off to use something else for fleas and use Interceptor for your heartworm control. Advantage Multi, again, got the asterisk here because it really does do it all, does an excellent job of it all. It has Advantage in it. It also has a heartworm preventative in it. It's easy to apply topically, and it does a pretty good job on everything that it does. And again, nothing is great for fleas. I want to stress that. There isn't anything that's really all that great for fleas. Some products work quite well for a short time, but very often the fleas catch up with the product long before the product is proven itself. As far as I'm concerned with a dog, the best combination is to use Sentinel and combine that with topical Frontline. With Sentinel, when you use this, you apply Frontline, you get flea kill for the most part, or at least flea repellent effect in a topical. So that's your first line of defense against fleas. And then if your dog has been taking Sentinel, it also has a circulating level of Lufenuron in its system, which is the birth control drug for fleas, so that if the flea gets past the front line and bites your dog, it gets a dose of Lufenuron, and any eggs it lays will hopefully be sterile. So you have a double layer of protection against fleas. That's usually my preferred means, and it still is, even after a number of years and a zillion new products coming and going on the market. That's still my preference. Frontline is not near as effective against fleas as it used to be, but it's still a pretty good product. Revolution with Frontline, this is what I do on my cat. I use topical Revolution at the beginning of each month for heartworm prevention, and it gives me some flea protection. And then during the heart of the flea season, I will also use Frontline. About midway through the month, I'll apply a dose of Frontline to the cat so that it has that extra protection against fleas. And I find that works quite well for controlling fleas or preventing fleas on a cat. I'm not looking to control fleas, I'm looking to prevent them. Controlling fleas means you have a flea problem. So what you want to do is prevent a flea problem. Now there are old style products on the market, BioSpot, a lot of them are over the counter now, Defender, there are just a zillion of them, of the old style products, and a lot of new style products which are just variations on the old style products that are produced by Sargents and Harts and those companies. Most of the time those products are dangerous in cats. They can kill your cat if you're not careful. Whatever you do, never grab a product that's a flea product, an insecticidal product that is labeled for dogs and apply it to a cat. Because when it says don't use it in cats, or it says not for use in cats, or it says for dogs only, that's a euphemism for it may kill your cat. So don't take chances with it. Don't let your cat mess with your dog right after you've applied it to your dog. These products are potentially deadly to cats, but they still work against fleas to some extent, just not as well as they used to. You should use preventative on every pet, even if you keep them on the boat. Especially if you have multiple pets. If you have only one pet, you should still use some kind of flea product on it. You just don't have to worry about it near as much. Okay, you can do it. If you're using a topical, instead of doing it every 3 weeks during the heart of flea season, you can do it every 5 or 6 weeks. If you have multiple pets, you should use every product, and if you need to use it more frequently than you might normally, then do that. But because your likelihood of having a flea problem increases geometrically with each pet that you add to your population. The more pets, the more potential for infestation. And again, here are the products that I recommend for flea control. We've got Comfortis and Trifexis with the question mark beside them because, again, they're both oral products that are usable for flea control, and they work quite well. Okay, and the Trifexis has heartworm control, hookworm, whipworm, and roundworm. I mean, excellent products. There's just an issue with these products about seizures. And if you've been using these products for a prolonged period of time, take that as an entire season or longer, and never had any problem with them, you're probably not going to. Okay. There's always that one there's always that 1 in 1,000 case that comes in who's used it for 2-3 years and now suddenly he has a seizure. It's time to change to something else in that case. But it's not likely you're going to run into that situation. Frontline Plus, okay, or Frontline. The plus means nothing to me. Frontline in cats is an excellent product. It's also a pretty decent product in dogs for tick control. They got Advantage over here on the left. Decent. Those are both. The thing I like about Frontline and Advantage is the safety factor. Okay, there may be some products now that are on the market that might be a little better than they are, a little more effective for a while, but they generally do not have the safety margin that you have with Frontline and Advantage. On the right over here, you have Advantage Multi, which again is Advantage just with a separate heartworm ingredient added. And then you have Sentinel, which again works in an entirely different way from everything else. It has the heartworm preventative that's effective against hookworm, whipworm, and roundworm. And then as a second ingredient, it contains lufenuron, which is a flea birth control product that will help prevent the eggs from hatching. So those are the flea products on the market that I consider to be worth considering. Your veterinarian may think otherwise, and if you want to follow his advice, that's strictly up to you. Like I said, you're only going to be out there for a few days. If you're using something, probably best to stay with it. Ticks are best avoided. We need to be concerned about ticks because of the health ramifications for us, for humans. They carry diseases. They carry diseases that can be devastating to us and our pets. They are relatively easy to prevent, and again, here's another situation where I can't stress enough that you need to check frequently. If you're in tick country, you should be checking every other day because most of the time it takes a good 24 hours before a tick to attach and start sucking blood and get to the point where it can transmit disease. So usually you've got a 24-hour window with ticks. If you're using a preventative on your pet, it buys you a little more time because it slows them down. Check your pet frequently. Look particularly around the head and shoulders. Look in the ears. Look in the little crinkles in the ears, the little helices in the ears. They sometimes will tuck in there. Look down in the ear canal. Check and make sure you find anything there. Look between the toes. Look in the armpits. All right. Mostly it's the head region that ticks go to, so that's the place to concentrate. But sometimes you'll run a flea comb or a brush over your dog, and you'll find a tick kind of marching along somewhere down around his butt. And what he's doing is probably on the long trek up to the head where he's planning on biting and attaching. Ticks seem to come from nowhere sometimes. They are activated. They're an interesting critter. They are activated when they're sitting out in the brush waiting for an animal to come along. They're activated evidently by body heat, the presence of body heat, which causes them to essentially release their hold on wherever they're waiting and drop onto the animal that's walking by. And then it takes them a while to get in position and go through all the motions that they have to in order to attach and start sucking blood. So they are relatively easy to prevent. Just about anything that's labeled for ticks will do a decent job. Frontline, Advantix, BioSpot, the old products that are on the market, Defender X Spot, I mean, there's a lot of things that will work reasonably well on ticks. I still can't say that there's anything that works great on ticks. I have taken ticks off dogs. I used to take them when I'd find the big fat tick on there, and we'd remove it and we'd stick them in a jar of alcohol, and or a jar of formalin, and the next day they're still wiggling around. So they are slow to die. So there's not anything that you can use that's going to be particularly safe on your pet that's going to have any significantly greater effect on a tick than any of the other products that are on the market. So on cats, I suggest Frontline. Remember, permethrin, which is the active ingredient in Advantix and Biospot, is toxic to cats. And anything that ends with the word me, or with the spelling METHRIN, or sometimes just ETHRIN, is potentially toxic to cats. The old-fashioned natural pyrethrin, which is a derivative of the chrysanthemum flower, is generally considered to be safe for cats. All of these other products on the market are synthetic derivatives of that and are dangerous to your cat. So my attitude is, before you use anything on your cat, make sure that it is safe. Don't kill your cat, and be aware of the over-the-counter products excuse me, that come from Harts and Sargents. They are very often potentially dangerous in cats. And remember that tick-borne diseases are dangerous to you and me. This is me down in the Dominican Republic, checking over one of the dogs down there, looking for ticks. Notice I'm looking in the ears, looking around on the face and head, shoulders area. Also look between the toes, look in the armpits, and just look everywhere. Mosquitoes and black flies are generally much less of a problem for pets than they are for people. You can try some Skin So Soft. That sometimes will keep mosquitoes away. Skin So Soft also will work somewhat on no-see-ums, which are not particularly bad for dogs and cats unless you get into a cloud of them where they get in your eyes and all that sort of thing, in which case they can bother your pet just as much as you. DEET products are dangerous, okay? They are potentially poisonous in cats. They can be dangerous in dogs. The issue is how concentrated a product can your dog tolerate. You usually can get away with a light spraying of DEET, but Skin So Soft, frankly, is safer. Okay, it's nothing more than an oil, and if your dog licks it off, maybe he'll get a little bit of loose stool from the oiliness of it, but generally not going to be toxic to your dog. If any of these products tend to cause any symptoms, wash them off. It's that simple. Wash it off immediately. Usually you'll limit the exposure, but keep DEET away from cats. Be careful with it on dogs. If you decide you're going to use it at your own risk. Insecticide poisoning, remember, can happen to anything with any product. Insecticide is toxic. Now, there are a few insecticides on the market in the past several years that are supposedly work on the systems in the insect that you and I don't share with the insect. However, there's still even some debate on those. One of those would be spinosad, which is the product that the ingredient that's in Comfortus and Trifexis. It supposedly works on insects in using a pathway that we don't have in the human body or in the mammalian body. But that doesn't say that particular product isn't going to cause some other symptom that's unexpected, as in the seizure issue with those products. So with pyrethrin and pyrethroid type insecticides, just be careful with them. Like I said, if you use the one there that I have listed as pyrethrin, that is usually safe in cats and dogs. But there are enough products and enough imitation products on the market now that it's hard for people to determine what they're using and whether it's safe. So my attitude is just avoid them. You can also use, you can also get poisoning when you use such products like DEET, okay, like OFF that contain DEET. A lot of the cutter products contain DEET. Be careful with those products. Symptoms generally tend to be neurologic or neuromuscular, especially you'll see it in cats if they get exposed to these products, and will include things like tremors and salivation. They may stumble and lose coordination. You may even get seizures. And cats are more sensitive than dogs. If you see any kind of tremoring, that sort of thing, you should immediately wash the product off. Whatever you've applied, wash it off using a dishwashing detergent like Dawn. Give them a good bath, concentrating on the area where you applied it, and maybe the facial area also to get any that might be around on the face. And then give them a good rinsing and wipe them down, and hopefully you'll catch it in time. If you don't, this is an emergency, needs to be seen by a veterinarian, very often needs to be hospitalized, and it can be a rather involved, usually 24-hour hospitalization to get them over the hump. At first appearance, bathe them. And, don't hesitate to see a veterinarian if you think things are going to get worse. So here we're talking about the newer products that are on the market. Comfortis, which contains spinosad. Okay, once a month flea control. Worked quite well when it first came out. I'm not hearing as raving reports now as I was back then. It's new, but at the same time, it's a trade-off because we're lowering the seizure threshold in susceptible patients. The same applies to Trifexis. Okay, it's a great product. The heartworm component that does heartworm, hookworms, whipworms, and roundworms, that component is perfectly safe as far as these products go. It's as safe as any product on the market. I don't say that anything is perfectly safe because any animal can have an issue with any product. But for the most part, it's been used in millions and millions of patients without any significant issues. It's the spinosad component that can lower the seizure threshold in susceptible patients, and it makes me question as to, is it really better? Now, Advantage Multi is a new product that is a combination of a couple of old products, imidacloprid and moxidectin. The imidacloprid is the insecticidal component, which is, when it came out 10, 15 years ago, was a brand new class of insecticide. And the nice thing about that product was that it is quite safe. You still see this product used in some of the household baits that they use for insects, the roach baits and things like that. It's a pretty safe product. Your pet can eat it, not have any major problems from it. And it's combined in this topical with moxidectin, which is a close relative of ivermectin, the product that's in HeartGuard. And the moxidectin is the part of the product that controls hookworms, whipworms, roundworms, prevents heartworms, does all of that, does ear mites. It's an excellent product. Moxidectin, when it first came out 15 years or so ago, was an injectable, came out as an injectable heartworm prevention called ProHeart 6, and when one injection would provide 6 months worth of protection against heartworms. It was considered a miracle product at the time. Well, within a year or so of using it, and veterinarians jumped on it because it was so convenient. They didn't have to send medication home with people. People didn't have to mess with giving pills every month, didn't have to mess with anything for heartworm except come in twice a year for an injection. The problem was that it started killing dogs. And so it got yanked off the market. Well, it reappeared in Advantage Multi, and evidently it's been around long enough in that formulation, applied topically, for us to see that it's pretty safe, not having any problems with it. Works very well. So sometimes newer is better if we just formulate it in the right way. By injection, it wasn't so good. So anyway, beware of any product that comes on the market and your veterinarian says, this is brand new, let's use it on your pet. I always like to call me old-fashioned, but I always like to give a new product a year or two on the market to see what the bugs are going to be before I go experimenting with it on somebody's pet. And the products that I have given you that I recommend are tried and true. They've been around for years. They generally work quite well. All right. So here's the question: is newer really better? The drug companies think so because they like to bring out new products all the time to stay ahead of the competition. Okay, they brought out Frontline, it worked great. Then they brought out Frontline Plus a couple of years after that, where they added methoprene, which was an old-fashioned type of growth regulator. In other words, to try and sterilize flea eggs. It had been around on the market for 20 years or so. They stuck it in Frontline to make Frontline Plus. And then now they have brought out a product called Frontline Tritac. And this is fipronil with cyphenothrin, which is an additional um, an additional type of insecticide. In cats, it's etofenprox in the cat version, and it also contains methoprene. So we've taken two newer, potentially more dangerous products and put them in Frontline to try and get an additional appeal to the buying public. Frontline is still reasonably safe. These newer products, questionable. They have yet to prove themselves, as far as I'm concerned. Fiprogard is the one that you can buy over the counter. This is Frontline Plus by another name. Fiprogard and Fiprogard Plus are the same. Fiprogard Max is not, if you happen to run into that. So try to avoid Fiprogard Max. These are some of the products that you'll see under generic type labels in places like Sam's and Walmart, that sort of thing. You can get Parastar or Easy Spot, and those are available in places. Those are generally the same as Frontline, pretty much. They are, just marketed under a different name. But watch out for the products that contain the pluses and the maxes, because that generally means there's another ingredient in it that is made, a little newer, a little more modern, a little more potent, and maybe a little more dangerous. Okay, but I am personally, and it's taken me a number of years now to really get on board with Advantage Multi, but in both cats and dogs, I find Advantage Multi to be an excellent product. So, intestinal parasites. What about worms? They are always a threat. The eggs are in the soil. If there are animals in the area, then those animals are likely to have worms. If they have worms, then there's going to be worm eggs in the soil, which means if your pet goes sniffing around on the ground, picking things up in its mouth, it's likely to pick up worm eggs and thereby intestinal parasites. So, you should have a stool sample checked periodically. Use Sentinel or Interceptor or Advantage Multi for heartworm prevention, and you pretty much aren't going to have to worry about these issues. The only issue that they don't deal with is tapeworm. And tapeworm, generally, you can most of the time, can watch for, or if you happen to be in an area where tapeworm is a threat, a human health threat, you can take your pet in a couple of times a year and get a tapeworm injection or a tapeworm tablet to deal with tapeworm control. The intestinal worm control in Sentinel, Interceptor, and Advantage Multi is a very, very nice side benefit, so much so that it almost becomes the primary benefit in some cases. All right, now we're done with parasites. Let's talk a little bit about common health problems that you might run into. Okay, these are things that just are everyday occurrences that can happen ashore just as easily as they can aboard the boat. However, the corollary to that is that they can happen just as easily aboard a boat as they can when you're ashore. So, we need to deal with those products and know what's important and what's not. Well, eye problems are potentially very important. Don't wait to get help if you see that your pet's having a problem with a runny eye. The one thing you can do is take that bottle of irrigating solution, eye irrigating solution that we talked about in the previous session. Take that bottle of eye irrigating solution, tilt the animal's head back, hold the eye open, and squirt the conjunctival sac. Squirt around the edges of the eye, hold the lids open, and try and get under the lids and see if you can flush anything out of the eye. A lot of times when we have a runny eye, that's all it will take. All right. If we have two runny eyes that have come on suddenly at the same time, you can do that to both eyes. But most of the time when you have two runny eyes, there's an irritant involved. There may have been something sprayed in the eyes. There may have been dust that's gotten in the eyes. The pet may have gotten its nose in someplace where it shouldn't and got something in its eyes. You can try rinsing them out. But if you see an exceptional amount of redness, if you see painful squinting where he doesn't want to open his eye, you need to get to a vet and you need to get there as soon as possible, because an eye problem can result in a lost vision or even a lost eye, sometimes within 24 hours. It is a potential serious emergency. Flush the eyes twice a day profusely until you can get to a vet. Don't use Visine or any other symptomatic treatment. Those are products that contain chemicals in them that are designed to shrink the blood vessels and quote, get the red out. What that does is simply cover up symptoms. Those symptoms are what clued you in that you have a problem. You want those symptoms to persist until they go away naturally. So don't use some product that's going to artificially remove the red. And remember, an eye can deteriorate in a hurry. You need to get help. This is a picture of a bottle of eye irrigating solution, 4-ounce bottle. You take off the little wrapper, unscrew the cap, tilt the bottle upside down in the palm of your hand, and squeeze it. And direct the flow of the spray into the eye, the corners of the eye. Another thing that you can do in the event that you have a situation arise like this that will sometimes work as a replacement for this in a pinch. I don't generally recommend this, but if you feel the need that you need to flush out an eye and you don't have any eye irrigating solution, is to boil up some water and let it cool. Okay, make sure it's cooled down to the point where it's cool after you've boiled it for a minute or two. Let it cool down and pour it into a Ziploc bag. All right, so you've got a nice half full Ziploc bag, and then stick the Ziploc bag with a pin. And you can, with that Ziploc bag zipped shut, you can squeeze this bag and force the water out through the little pinhole that you've made and kind of direct that into the eye. It's going to burn more than eye irrigating solution because it's not buffered and it's not balanced, but it is sterile, and it still will help to physically flush something out of the eye if there's something in there that needs to be gotten out. So that's just a little helpful hint that you may find useful. Anyway, moving along, we've got ear problems. Okay, ear problems are likely to become a problem if you're not watching. If you have a pet that has ear problems, you're already aware of them. So you need to watch closely, because when you get out on the water where the humidity level is higher, if there's any swimming going on, if you have a potential for ear problems, they're going to be exacerbated by contact with the water. I always tell people whenever I do my webinars and my seminars, know what the ears look and smell like when they're healthy. Get in the habit of getting your nose down there. Look in your pet's ears. See what they look like. Is there a lot of discharge? They should look relatively clean. They shouldn't look much different than looking into your own ear or your child's ear. And they should smell they should smell not unpleasant. Sometimes they'll have, especially if there's some wax present, they'll smell a little waxy, or sometimes even a little rancid. If they stink, you've got a problem. If they both stink, you've got a problem in both ears. If you got one ear that smells different from the other ear, and this is probably the most key factor, if you've got one ear that smells distinctly different from the other ear, you probably have an infection problem. So get so that you're in the habit of checking those ears frequently, and you know what is normal for your particular pet. If your particular pet has ear problems on a regular basis, know what they look and smell like so that you can recognize when you're having more than the usual problem. So start sniffing those ears at the same time that you're checking for ticks and fleas. Get down a couple of times a week. Look and smell those ears. Remember, if one smells different, there's probably a problem. I generally recommend that you use swimmer's ear drying solution each time after swimming. And I'm not talking here about dog products. I'm talking about the stuff that they sell in dive shops and drugstores for people to use in your ears, for you to use in your ears after you've gone swimming. All right. And you should probably be in the habit of doing that yourself. If you carry swimmer's ear drying solution, it will prevent that, so you can get in the water and get water in your ears time after time after time and never have any problem with it. And then all of a sudden, at one point, you'll get a little bit of water trapped in your ear, and you'll end up with an earache. And that earache may be the beginning of chronic ear problems for you. So what you want to do is try to avoid that situation. The same goes for your dog. He may swim in the water routinely and never have any problem with water in his ear, but all of a sudden one of these days he's going to have an ear infection from it. So you need to do what you can to head that off. And again, if your dog has an ear product that controls his or her particular ear problem, bring it along. All right, make sure you have enough along to deal with the problem if it flares up while you're out there. We're going to talk a little bit about the swimmer's ear drying solution in a moment. So here's the after swimming routine that I recommend, and I recommend you do this anytime when your dog has been swimming in order to avoid trouble. When I practiced up on the Great Lakes and when I practiced on Chesapeake Bay, I used to routinely during swimming weather, I would get a dog in a couple times during the summer. That an owner would bring in. The dog would have this stinky, nasty skin and coat problem, oozing sores, all of this. And the dog had a dermatitis, and I would inquire as to whether this dog been swimming lately. The owner would say, "No, he hasn't been swimming." I say, "You sure? There hasn't been any exposure?" And almost invariably, I would get a response of, "Well, a week ago we were at the beach, but that was a week ago." Okay. So what very often happens in this situation? You take your pet swimming, take them to the beach. The beach is a bacterial area of bacterial ridden water that you and I go swimming in, and try our best not to inhale and suck it down. But frankly, there's usually in a heavily swimming area, the bacterial burden in that water is somewhere close to a dangerous level. But even if it's not, in areas where there's activity in the water along the shoreline, usually the bacterial count is significantly higher than it's going to be out in the open water. So even in the Great Lakes, even in Higgins Lake, it's not going to be the same up near shore as it is out in the middle of the lake. So, but people would tell me that, yes, we took him a week ago. And what happens is the dog swims, he frolics in the water, does all the things that he does, and then he goes and he flops down in the sun, lays there in the sun. Well, he's got all this bacteria, this water trapped in his coat. Sure, he shakes off, but he's still got all this water trapped in his coat. He flops down in the sun and lays there in the warmth of the sun, incubating all this bacteria down against his skin. And then when he goes home, what happens when you go home? You go to the shower and you take a shower as soon as before you even leave the beach a lot of the times. But you take a shower as soon as you get home, or you take one that night. The dog doesn't get one. So a couple of days later, all of a sudden the dog's starting to itch. He's got sores on his skin. He scratches and draws a little blood when he's scratching. Now we got bacteria into the tissues, and we get this nasty dermatitis that requires antibiotics for a couple of weeks in order to clear it up, and a lot of special attention. If you get in this routine after every swimming episode, you should be able to avoid this kind of problem. And that is to rinse the coat profusely. This is not a bath. You don't need any shampoo any more than you needed at the beach when you go step under one of those showers and rinse yourself off after swimming. And if you live in areas where you're swimming in salt water, you're always going to have one of those, or just about always going to have one of those showers available to shower under. Up in the Great Lakes, they don't usually provide them because frankly don't need them that badly when all you're doing is getting your sand off, getting sand from the beach off your body. But on areas where you're swimming in salt water, they're generally available. Rinse the coat profusely with copious amounts of fresh water. It's not a bath. Shampoo tends to suck all the protective oils and all that out of the skin. While getting wet is natural, shampooing is not. Okay, when you're done with the rinsing of the body, now what you want to do is hold the hose up against the ears. If you're under a spray, don't get too close. You don't want to drive water down into the ear canal. You just want to let water flow into the ear canal gently. And essentially, there's 3 stages of dirty ears, okay, or swimming ears. There's no water in the ears, there is dirty water in the ears, and then there is clean water in the ears. Our preference is to have clean, dry ears. Our next preference, if we can't have that, is to have fresh, clean water in the ears. The least thing you want is to have dirty water in the ears. So rinse the ears, let some fresh water get in there, massage it around, get the dirty water out. Then when you're done, towel dry the ears, towel dry the animals completely as possible, towel dry the ears especially as completely as possible. And then put 1 or 2 drops of ear drying solution into each ear, okay, and massage it really well, massage it around in the ear and wipe it again. And that, what will happen is with this product, it has a very high strength alcohol in this product that wants to combine with water. Alcohol likes water. So what it will do is when you put it in there, the alcohol will combine with the water, and then what does alcohol do? What's the cooling effect come from? Evaporation. So as soon as it combines with the water and you massage it around real well and then wipe it out, the residue is going to evaporate and be gone. and left behind will be some glycerin that's in this product that will help moisturize the ear to keep it from being too dried out. Very good product. And here is this is a product that I use. I bought a couple bottles of this 20 years ago. I don't know where I bought it, at a dive shop or someplace. Used it up probably within a year or so. And since then I made my own. I just refill this bottle. It's a 1-ounce bottle. I refill it every time it needs refilling. And what you can, I mean, you'll pay $3 for a cheap bottle of this. You're normally going to pay $5-6 for a 1-ounce bottle of this stuff. You can go to the drugstore and you can buy a pint bottle of isopropyl alcohol and a bottle of glycerin for a couple of bucks, okay, $2-3. And from those bottles, you can make a dozen or more bottles of this stuff, for that $3. So it's a high markup product. It's easy to make it on your own. Just make sure the alcohol you use is isopropyl 90%. Okay, now that may be 91, 93, 95, 97. I've seen all different strengths. Do not use rubbing alcohol. Do not use ethyl alcohol. Do not use any other kind of alcohol. You do not want 70% rubbing alcohol. You don't want any of those products. You want isopropyl 90%. Fill the bottle almost to the neck with the alcohol, and then add a few drops of glycerin. Some people like more than others. The more glycerin you put in, the smoother and silkier the stuff feels, and the more clingy it feels. It's harder to get off your fingers. But I usually like to put just 2, 3, 4 drops of glycerin into a bottle when I make it up, and then shake it well, and you've got a brand new bottle of the stuff. And that alone will, pay for the cost of sitting at my website for an hour. Okay, gastrointestinal problems, a new problem we're going to deal with here. At some point, everybody runs into vomiting and or diarrhea. It happens to us, it happens to our pet. Very often it's a matter of you had some friends over, sitting in the cockpit, having a few hors d'oeuvres, whatever, and even though you told your friend, my dog has a sensitive stomach, don't give him anything to eat, they can't resist Fluffy's big brown eyes sitting there looking up at him. So when you're down below filling your wine glass, they're shoveling hors d'oeuvres at the dog, trying to make him go away. And you wake up in the middle of the night to some whining, or worse yet, to an odor that's a little bit overwhelming. Suddenly you've got an issue. Well, the best way to deal with this right off the bat is to don't give any food for the next 24 hours. 12 hours is usually probably enough. But don't give in. If the animal acts hungry, give it them a while for the system to settle down, because diarrhea can take some effort. If there is vomiting, you need to limit water. If there's any question about whether there's vomiting or whether the dog is sick, hold off on the water. Water will stimulate vomiting. If you want to offer a little water, give an ice cube to lick, and wait an hour, give another one. That'll keep the mouth moist. Because once the vomiting starts, if you allow them to drink water as much as they want to drink, very often there's a tendency to drink a large volume of water, and suddenly they turn around and up all the water, and again, along with that, some electrolytes, and before you know it, you've got a problem. So don't worry about withholding food and water. They're not going to starve. They're not going to die of thirst, okay? Just keep their mouth moist with a little ice cube. If they're losing large volumes of fluid, you need to get to a veterinarian sooner rather than later. But remember that most oral medication is not effective if the vomiting is severe. If you give oral medication and it doesn't come back up, probably the vomiting wasn't that bad. If the vomiting is bad, the medication you give orally to try and treat it is going to probably come back up. So vomiting is not very severe. Here's one of the rules of thumb. Vomiting that's not very severe is generally going to be self-limiting. Just like when you've got a hangover and you throw up a couple of times, it's out of your system, and you need to sleep a little bit and you're better. So after you've fasted them, start in slowly on a bland diet. Okay, I like boiled and drained hamburger, or boiled and drained chopped boiled skinless chicken. A very small amount, all right, relative to the amount of rice. Mix up a nice big volume of rice and put a couple tablespoons of boiled meat of some kind in it, boiled and drained. And remember, this is not a complete diet. This is just an exercise for the intestinal tract to kind of get it back into motion and flowing in the right direction. All right. I had a lady come in one time I've got a thing on my blog, a post on my blog about this story, the hamburger and rice diet, where the lady came in and we were talking about diet. She had a sick dog, and I asked what the regular diet was, and she said boiled hamburger and rice. And I said, oh, you mean because he's sick? And she said, no, I've been using that for years. This dog was, I don't know how old it was, 7, 8 years old. And what she said, back when he was a puppy, he had a problem, and the veterinarian told me to feed boiled hamburger and rice. So I did, and she'd been doing it ever since. He didn't bother to tell her to quit. Okay, didn't bother to tell her that this diet is not a complete diet and you could run into some serious nutritional problems from feeding it for a prolonged period of time. So this is a temporary diet, just for your information. And when you do start feeding, don't be in a hurry. Don't try to catch up. Go slow, take it slow and easy. Slow and easy wins the race. There's no need to catch up. Most pets are overweight, if anything, so we're not worried about any weight loss or any issues here. And feed small amounts frequently over the next 24 to 48 hours as you gradually change back over to the regular diet. If the problem lasts more than 24 hours, 18 to 24 hours, get to a veterinarian. In other words, if you see the problem getting worse rather than better, start heading off to find that veterinarian and be ready to take him in. Wounds. Okay, if they are bleeding, apply pressure. All right, you can use your quick clot if you've got a gushing, squirting wound. That's pretty unlikely. Most wounds that happen on pets are not that major and not that life-threatening. But if you've got an oozing wound that just doesn't want to stop bleeding, the answer is pressure. Apply pressure, 10 minutes or more. Don't keep lifting your hand off to see if it stops, because every time you do that, you disrupt the clot. So sit down, look at a watch, and time yourself for 15 minutes. If at the end of 15 minutes you've still got a problem, do it again. And if it continues to be a problem, start looking for a vet. There's always the possibility there's a bleeder someplace that's hidden out of sight, and that's the source of the oozing. But those are hard to find, even if we're a veterinarian, without getting into some major surgery to look for it. So oozing blood, even though it seems to be a lot of oozing, is usually less of an issue. So apply pressure. And if you get it to subside significantly, you can then apply a pressure bandage. Keep the wound clean and leave it open. Don't throw a bunch of goop on it. Don't throw bag balm on it. Don't throw neosporin on it. All the goopy stuff that you put on the wound just tends to attract dirt and make the wound dirty. It also gets in the way if you do end up having to take it into a veterinarian and have it repaired. Then we have to wash all that stuff out of there, and it's hard to get it all out. So the key to wound care is keep it clean. All right, clean is the key word here. Leave it open and keep it clean. If flies are going to be a problem, you can put a wrap over it so the flies can't get to it, but you need to change that wrap twice a day till you're sure how things are going. Start on some amoxicillin if you happen to have some along. If you don't have some along, you should get to a veterinarian and get started on some antibiotic. And remember that just about any skin wound is going to heal. If it doesn't kill the pet, eventually it's going to heal in some way. So if it's not a life-threatening injury, you just need to keep it clean. Don't play doctor and try to sew it up and go through all of those kinds of things. So we're going to talk here a little bit about foods and feeding. Not likely that you're going to run into any of these issues, but if you find little tiny bugs crawling around into food, it's probably weevils. They are generally not dangerous to your pet. You can feed it if you want to, if it doesn't gross you out too much. Back in the 1600s, 1700s, the British Navy used to feed sea biscuits to their sailors, and weevils were a routine part of it. Before they'd eat a biscuit, they'd knock it on the tabletop to dislodge any worms or bugs that might be in it before they ate it. Not going to kill you. It's another form of protein, but pretty distasteful to most people. So as soon as you have the opportunity to replace it, replace the food. Usually means the food's been stored for too long when you find weevils in the food. Not a big deal if your pet eats them. Not going to cause any problems there, but watch out for mold. If you smell mold, if you see cobwebs in the food, if you get any impression that there's moldiness, if the food feels moist and gooey and it smells bad, throw it out. Get rid of it. Your pet's much better off eating your table food for the time being than taking a chance with mold. Mold contains a number of toxins, most of which are quite dangerous when it's moldy pet food. And this is not like Roquefort cheese. Okay, the mold that's in pet food has the potential to be toxic and can cause permanent liver damage and death. So get rid of it. If there's even a doubt as to whether it might be mold, throw it out. Pet safety. Okay, you should start now if you haven't already, and that means before you move, before you take off and go on a trip, do some pet overboard drills. Get accustomed to getting your pet, teaching your pet how to get back aboard the boat. For cats, I always suggest throwing either a long rug hanging over the stern rail into the water that the cat can sink its claws into. Um, or you can get a large piece of hawser, say a 4-inch rope from somebody who a tugboat captain who tows barges. Could spare for $10. You could probably buy a 6-foot length of rope that you could tie to your stern rail that could dangle in the water, and your cat could run up that. The whole key is it's got to be something for your cat that he can get his claws into. They got to be able to swim in the right direction. There's very often a tendency on a part of a pet when they fall in the water, for as soon as they splash down, whatever their eyes fix upon is where they're going to swim. So if there's a shore that's 200 yards away and that's what they see, they're going to swim toward it even though the boat's 3 feet behind them. So you've got to teach them how to swim in the right direction. So you need to show them where the rope is, and then maybe have a couple of overboard drills where you drop them in the water, 4 feet from the rope, and somebody stands at the top of the rope and calls them, and let them swim toward it. But just watch out when they hit that rug or that rope, and they're going to come flying out of the water, and if you're in the way, they might run right over your face. So teach them where that is, and then what you need to do is next time take them a little further from the rope and let them swim to it, and in incremental margins, you need to get further and further from the rope until you're all the way at the bow of the boat and let them swim all the way to the stern. Or you can hang another one over the bow when you're at anchor. I'd say it's up to you however you want to do it. But just work with them so they've got some idea of how to get back aboard. A dog needs to go to the swim platform or wherever you can lift him out of the water. If he's a 150-pound dog, you're probably going to need a good quality harness on the dog and a hoist of some sort to get him out of the water. Unless you can teach him to go up the steps, I have a couple of suggestions here for ideas that you might want to try, and there's more on my website, CaptainDrDave.com. Some more ideas of things that you can get. They're not inexpensive, these products, for helping your dog get aboard the boat, but they can literally save your dog. Do not take your 15-year-old golden retriever or your 18-year-old 25-pound cat and suddenly throw them in the water and expect them to learn anything here. This is not an attempt to kill your pet. Older pets, you just need to either not take along or be prepared to be constantly on deck supervising so that they don't have an accident. Those that can't pass this test and can't get the knack of the overboard drill need to either stay ashore or stay below. Remember that declawed cats and jumpers should never be on deck unsupervised. And by jumpers, I mean those who have learned that they really like being in the water and are going to have a tendency to jump overboard when you're not looking just because they like swimming around in the water. And we run into cats that are that way as well as dogs. Declawed cats, on the other hand, have nothing to grab on with, no way to get themselves out of the water. They're usually too deep in the water to be able to grab a swim platform. So it is a matter of avoiding a disaster rather than dealing with it when it occurs. Now remember that cats have a tendency to, when the boat starts rocking, have a tendency to want to maintain their balance. Sometimes if there's a sudden wake that comes through the anchorage and the boat does a sudden rock to one side, the cat's going to be startled, may jump up in the air, and when he comes back down, if the boat's rocking across a broadside to a large wake, when he comes back down onto the deck may not be there. It may have rocked over the other way and he may end up in the water. That is a good justification for using lifeline netting on a boat to keep a cat aboard that might otherwise fall off. If they want to get through lifeline netting, they're going to get through lifeline netting. It's not going to stop a cat for the most part. They'll go over it, they'll go under it, they'll go through it. But it can save your cat's life in the event that something accidental happens and keep him from falling overboard inadvertently. Make sure you keep cats out of the machinery rooms. You don't want a cat in your engine room. Not good. Not a good situation at all. Don't want him getting in where there's pumps and electronics and water makers and all of those good things. Don't want him anywhere near the belts on your engine, because most of the time on boats Those kinds of things are not adequately screened. Cats have a hard enough time dealing with car engines when they get caught in the belts of a car engine. You don't want them in the engine room of your boat. And here again, we talked about this earlier. The greatest threat to your pet when you take them cruising is not while you're underway. The greatest threat to your pet is when you're ashore, or when you are tied up alongside a dock and he decides he's going ashore whether you want him to or not. So getting your pet lost is the biggest thing, and thus the importance of the pet ID tags that we talked about in the first session of this class. So there are pet safety devices that you might be interested in. And don't use anything without testing it first. Don't take somebody else's word for it. You need to make sure that it fits properly. You're talking about life jackets. It's not going to work if they don't wear it. All right. When I was cruising, I spent 4 years down in the Caribbean, cruising around down in the Caribbean. We saw lots and lots of pets. Only once or twice did I ever see a pet wearing a life jacket. Wearing a life jacket aboard a boat for a pet is just as popular as it is for the human people aboard the vessel to be wearing their life jacket. Okay, and when you're at anchor, you just don't wear life jackets, and most people don't have their pets wearing one. That's the honest truth of the matter. It may sound fashionable, it may be safety man talking, whatever, telling you that you never leave home without it, blah blah blah. The fact of the matter is, it's just not comfortable. So most pets are not wearing life jackets. Occasionally people will put them on, strap a life jacket on when they go for a ride in the dinghy to take the pet ashore, but most of the time not even then. It becomes such a routine to take the pet back and forth to shore that it's no more different for them taking the pet than it is for them going themselves, and most people don't wear life jackets for routine situations like that. People wear life jackets when the situation becomes life-threatening, just like when I put my harness on when I'm out sailing and it's nighttime, or a storm pipes up. I throw on my harness and tether and all of that stuff. I don't wear it routinely on the boat during the daytime. I just don't. So life jackets, the key to keep in mind is it won't help if they won't wear it, okay, or if they don't wear it. It should help with their flotation. It should not interfere with their movements and all of that. It should keep their head out of the water. That's the important thing. If the head's not kept out of the water, they can't breathe if their head's hanging in the water. Okay, it must allow you to lift the dog's weight, so it's got to have a good strap on it that you can grab like a handle for the size of the dog. If it's a 120-pound dog, it's got to be something you can hook a winch or a harness, you got to be able to hook a block and tackle or whatever to it. However you're going to lift him aboard, whether you're going to use your dinghy hoist, your davits, whatever you're going to use, it's got to have a place to attach, and that harness has to support the dog's weight. Life jackets I don't feel are appropriate for cats. I just don't. Cats are pretty good swimmers. If you have a cat that's so obese that that he can't handle himself in the water, then a life jacket's probably not going to help. I'm always concerned about the likelihood that if a cat falls in the water wearing a life jacket, between trying to swim and trying to get out of the life jacket, he's probably going to end up drowning. So my attitude is most animals are decent swimmers. And whether you're aware of it or not, there are certain breeds of dogs that are not. English bulldogs sink like a rock when they fall in the water. There are certain breeds. So if you don't know if your dog can swim or not, you need to test in shallow water and find out if he's able to swim. Most dogs swim very, very well, and the same goes for cats. How many animals do you think of can you think of that don't swim? I never thought much about squirrels until I was anchored in Weems Creek in Annapolis one year, and we were sitting aboard our friend's boat, and we watched a squirrel swimming across the creek, which was a distance of probably a quarter mile, something like that. It's a pretty wide creek. It might have been more than that. We were sitting in the cockpit having our sundowners and chatting, and all of a sudden I look off in the distance, and out in the middle of the creek there's a squirrel. And I thought, my God, that squirrel's gonna drown. I mean, I don't know how he got in the water, where he must have fallen from. So Roger and we got in his dinghy and we fired it up and we took off. And by the time we got caught up with the squirrel, he was about 10 feet from shore. And he ran up on the shore, and we thought, well, it's a good thing we were here, just in case. That he made it back, he made it across, and because we'd have saved his life if he needed it. So we went back and back to the cockpit and patted ourselves on the back and thought what great guys we were. And probably a half hour later, we're sitting there and we're looking out, and there's the squirrel swimming back across. And it never occurred to me at all that squirrels might do this, but he swam all the way back across, probably 20 minutes after he had swum across the first time, went all the way back across the creek without an episode. And this time we did not go and help him. We just laughed at ourselves and thought, gee, why, how stupid are we? So, most of the time animals can swim whether you're aware of it or not. That's the moral of that long drawn out story. Lifeline netting, we already talked about. It can save your cat. It can save your small dog. It can save your big dog for that matter if you have it hooked up right. So reboarding aids, harnesses, ladders, ropes, hoists, whatever the case may be, you need to be prepared for bringing your pet aboard in the event something bad happens. And remember that these bad things always happen at the worst time. They happen in the dark. They happen when the seas are rough. They happen during a squall or a storm. So you've got to be prepared for the worst case scenario. That's the key to being successful at any of this kind of thing. Pets should be tucked in when you're underway. Okay, if you've got rough seas that you're going through, they should be down. A cat should be tucked in a carrier or holed up in a closet or someplace where he feels safe and secure. A dog should be in a carrier down below. Okay, that's why airlines put dogs in carriers is for safety purposes, not because they want to be mean and cruel. A dog in a carrier is much better protected if the carrier goes flying in a bad situation. All the dog's going to hit is the inside of the carrier, and he's not going to be banging into tables or banging into things that are life-threatening, and most of the time they'll survive pretty uneventfully. But if they are flying around willy-nilly in the main salon when you're in a rough seas, you could end up with a broken leg. So keep in mind that a distant second choice is to have a heavy-duty harness and tether the dog to a pad eye in the cockpit. Then he's under your foot. You could end up falling overboard. If you fall overboard, what happens to him? So if you're concerned about him, take care of yourself and do things properly. And again, the greatest risk for cats is when you're tied up alongside. They're very likely to want to go ashore and check things out. Remember, curiosity killed the cat. Here's a couple of things that I have found. The Critters Inflatable up here at the top is an inflatable harness an inflatable life jacket that you can fit your dog with. Quite popular. I think presently, the last time I checked, it was not available right now. I think there's a funding issue with trying to get these things into production. But these pictures are from several years ago, and my most recent investigation of the product suggests that it's not available, and hopefully just temporarily, because it sounded like a pretty good idea, although you got to maintain those inflatable things. Even the ones that you wear yourself have to be maintained properly. The cartridges have to be changed periodically, all that. So there's a lot more to maintaining one of those than there is to a standard life jacket. There are some very good life jacket brands that I have listed on my website that you may want to check into, who make very good, very sturdy life jackets that I've heard good reports on. So I have them listed in the products section of my website. Check them out. Paws aboard here down in the corner. I've heard good, I haven't talked to anybody who owns one of these, but I've had this on my website for ages. It was one of the first products to come out of this nature, but the things that I read on Amazon about it, and it is, it is available. Most of the products I have on my website are available on Amazon. The Paws aboard has some issues with being difficult to set up. Some people had some issues with the steps being too narrow, difficult to use, lots of complaints. There always are. You got your complainers about everything. But it sounded to me like there may be some issues with it, and it's not an inexpensive product. It's a couple $100. But it's something to consider, but also check out the other products I have on my website. Behavioral issues, really not many. I think most of the time the animals that go cruising tend to be animals who have proven themselves. If you've got a dog who's a wacko, generally you're not going to choose to take him cruising with you. Now this is for long-term cruising. People who are doing short-term cruising, maybe there's more wackos out there than I ran into in the offshore cruising environment. But the questions that I get, who cruises better, a dog or a cat? In my opinion, cats, I think, adjust and adapt with fewer issues than a dog. If you start them out young, it's not going to matter. If you're thinking about getting an animal for the purpose of taking it cruising, start it when it's young. That's the best answer I can give you. Start it with a little litter box, available, and his own spot to sleep. If it's a dog, start him out with some puppy pads on the deck so you can teach him to go to the bathroom on the deck, and and just kind of take it a little at a time. They will generally adjust, and if they grow up on a boat, it's like growing up in a house. They don't know any different. What kind of dog cruises best? There are as many answers as there are cruisers. You'll see a lot of Labrador retrievers out there. We had a couple of people when Annie managed the marina in Baltimore for 4 years there. We had a couple who lived aboard a 22-foot hunter in the marina, and they had a 130-pound Labrador retriever that lived aboard with them. He was not a big fat Labrador retriever. He was a gigantic, gargantuan, oversized Labrador retriever, and a real sweetheart of a dog. And the three of them lived in this 22-foot boat together. So, size is not generally not always an issue. But the one thing I did run into when we were out living aboard was skipper keys. We ran into just a tremendously disproportionate number of skipper keys aboard boats, and they are a good boat dog. All right, they are a born and bred boat dog. They were born and bred originally. The breed was created over in the Low Country of Europe as a boat guard dog, basically for the barges on the canals there. So they are excellent at being a watchdog. They are not mouthy and barky unless somebody's coming aboard the boat, in which case they tend to make a lot of noise until they're satisfied that the person belongs there, and then they settle right down again. And I found that most of the time when we ran into a boat with skipper keys on board, they had more than one, sometimes as many as three. And I ran into more skipper keys when we were cruising. In the 4 years that we spent in the Caribbean, I ran into more skipper keys than I had seen in 20 years of veterinary practice. So, they're disproportionately popular and good boat dogs. Otherwise, other than the skipper key situation, I think the numbers of breeds and so forth aboard boats tend to reflect their popularity as a whole in the population. So the best answer is, if you've taught your dog to be good and comfortable and calm under all conditions, he's probably going to do well aboard a boat. Pay attention to whether your dog barks when you leave. All right, this is one of those behavioral issues that can be a problem when you're in an anchorage. Don't assume that if the dog's going to bark while you're riding away in your dinghy, and don't assume that he is going to stop when you're out of sight. Okay, we had a good friend who traveled aboard a sailboat with her dog, and when she'd leave, the dog would bark and would bark for a prolonged period of time. And her assumption always was that, well, he stops barking when I leave. Well, the truth of the matter was that nobody ever anchored near that boat very closely because of the fact that when she did leave, he didn't stop barking until she got back. And in an anchorage where sound carries as well as it does, it's not that it was intolerable, but it was prolonged, and it got to the point of being something of a nuisance. Barking bothers your neighbors. Remember that. You may feel like you're out in the middle of nowhere, but there's a bunch of people out in the middle of nowhere with you. So work on this before you leave. Make sure that your pet's not a barker. Appropriate barking is welcome. And as I mentioned, the skipper keys that were aboard the boat, if somebody went by and got too close to the boat, they'd bark. Okay, which was good. Everybody in the anchorage would look up, see what's going on. We all knew those dogs. We knew they didn't bark at nothing. So when we heard them bark, we'd look to see what was going on, which is a good thing in an anchorage. It's a good safety factor. So nothing wrong with appropriate barking, as long as it doesn't carry on indefinitely. The most common problem that was brought to me when I used to do speaking engagements was getting a dog to eliminate on board so you don't have to take your dog ashore all the time. Well, you're in a situation here where you're coastal cruising or local cruising, doing mostly day sails. You're not likely to have the problem of having your dog not be able to go to the bathroom for a prolonged period of time. So that's probably not an issue. But if it is, get my book on Pets on Board, Adapting Your Pet to Travel by Boat or RV. I go into some detail on how to do an incremental teaching training program to get your dog comfortable with going to the bathroom on the boat. It's an involved process, particularly if you have an older dog. If your dog's more than about 5 or 6 years old, it may be a a significant exercise in frustration. Okay, older pets are much harder to teach. You've taught them their entire life not to go to the bathroom in the house, and now suddenly you're saying it's okay, do it. Come on, let's do it, and you can't understand why he won't go. Okay, so don't get frustrated. There is a book called "You Can Teach Your Dog to Eliminate on Command" by Marjorie Smith. Um, it might be worth a look. And after like I said, after 5 years of age, it may be difficult to retrain your dog. Do not labor under the assumption that if he holds it long enough, he's going to eventually go, because some dogs will hold it until they're sick. So I generally am not a big fan of that. Show a little mercy. Toilet training your cat. This is another one of those things that tends to be have somewhat of a popularity issue. I do not consider it to be a good idea. You can try it if you want. I consider this to be more of a novelty than a practical idea for a cat on a boat. Um, if you're in a situation where you're in an anchorage and there are significant wake, your cat happens to be squatting over the toilet at that particular moment when a big wake comes through, he may fall in. And that sounds funny, but it may be the last time he ever goes near the toilet. It may be the beginning of some major issues with toilet training the cat, or getting him retrained to use a box. It could be, it could be a unpleasant situation. So my attitude is there's nothing wrong with a litter box. Just keep it clean. They're pretty easy to keep clean. You can throw for the matter, you can, throw the urine balls in the water. I mean, it's just sand for the most part, or mud. And or take it ashore with your garbage. Clean it, keep it clean regularly. You don't have to carry tons and tons of litter. If you're in a situation where you have a tide, a significant tide, you can, in a pinch, use some beach sand from below the high tide, below the high tide line, and use that temporarily until you have access to some litter again. But there are lots of alternatives here. I'm not sure that teaching the cat to use a toilet is a good idea, although it's very popular among the people who've done it. So, to get your pet comfortable with life on board, the easiest way, again, is if they grow up aboard the boat. So start out when they're young. Even if you're only going out periodically, take them with you every time you go. Get them comfortable with being on board, and preferably get them comfortable with being in a crate, okay, while they're aboard until you let them out, so that there's never any time when they're not supervised. Adult pets takes a little time. They need lots of time at rest. They need a lot of time aboard the boat before you first fire up the engine. They need lots of things to keep their attention. Take them on board, on deck, let them watch the birds, show them all the fun things, catch a couple of fish, bring those aboard, show them that there's some fun things that they can do on board. Senior pets, if you got an old dog and he's never been aboard before, it's probably not the best time to take him aboard and try to get him to adapt. You need to plan on living your life around the pet, and you need to adapt in that situation. We had some good friends who had a husky, and a Siberian husky, that they took cruising with them. They took him from New England down through Baltimore when we were there. We met them there. Very nice dog. They took the dog to the Bahamas, and the dog would not go to the bathroom ashore. I mean, would not go to the bathroom on the boat. So they had to make a point of every day going ashore twice a day so the dog could go to the bathroom. And frankly, it was a pain, okay? They hated it. But they had their dog's best interest at heart, and they made a point of getting the dog ashore every day. They tried he'll go, if we just make him go long enough, he'll go on his own. They tried, I think, a 24-hour or whatever longer period one time, and almost regretted it. The dog didn't cooperate, and so after that first trip, they went back to New England, and they ended up hanging up their cruising shoes until the dog died. So they went like 4 or 5 years without cruising, just because they didn't want to make the dog's life miserable. And sometimes you have to do that. And now they, after the dog died of old age, they started cruising again. So, sometimes you have to do that. Elimination on board is going to take time and effort. It's not an automatic thing. And remember, don't buy into that he'll eventually go myth. You can pick up a copy of My Pets on Board if you have any interest here. So that is it, pretty much it. Question is, for some people, how many pets is too many? These people were down in Puerto Rico when we were there. Got to be pretty good friends with them. They were very enjoyable people. They had 5 dogs and a cat, all on board this 44-foot sailboat. And these animals had been all the way from Puerto Rico to South America and back. They didn't have any issues with pets. Everything was fine with them. Notice the lifelines. Notice that the lifelines are anchored down fairly well with the cable along the bottom. Um, it was a pretty good situation. The pets all seemed happy. So when you get someplace, find out where veterinary help is each of the time along the way. Nowadays, you can do that in advance. If you got an idea what port you're going to be putting into, you can check online to see where the veterinarian is in each place, so that you have a phone number and an address. And generally, you're going to be in pretty good shape. You can plug that stuff into your phone or someplace, and have a record of it, so you can call when you get there if you need to. A lot of good stuff. If not, there are places. Those places where there isn't a veterinarian, you can check out the next destination, check with marina people, get on your computer and do a search. Go to the nearest pharmacy. They'll usually know where the veterinarians are. Your VHF radio, your cell phone, keep a log and a record of where the veterinarians are, so you have them for future cruises. That way you won't have to do it every time. Veterinarians usually stay in the same place. They aren't going to be moving around. So once you know where they're at, you're good for the future. So I wish you good luck here. You need to prepare for the import requirements. We talked about Canada. Mexico, very similar. Follow the rules. Use a leash. Make sure you do everything you're supposed to do. Don't, in the motto of the Seven Seas Cruising Association, leave a clean wake. In other words, don't leave memories with somebody of how lousy cruisers are to have in your community. How bad of people they are. Try to leave a good impression behind, so that people are happy to welcome cruisers. Carry adequate supplies for the length of whatever trip you're taking. Don't overdo it. Don't get carried away. You've been out on day sails with your cat or your dog. A week-long or a 2-week-long cruise is nothing but a week or 2 weeks of day sails. So have fun. Concentrate on having fun. Use a little common sense and caution. Make sure you have adequate identification on your pet, so that your fun cruise doesn't turn into a tragedy. And just enjoy yourself. Don't be spooked by what might happen. I was at a seminar at a boat show years ago doing this talk, and when I got all done with doing my offshore version of Cruising with Pets, and I got all done with my talk, a lady came up to me to ask questions, I thought, and her comment was, well, after everything you've told me, I'm not going to go out there and have my pet die. The likelihood of anything happening is minuscule. Okay, it's just not likely you're going to have anything bad happen. What I'm trying to do is prepare you for the possibility, so you can think about it in advance. Think about how to react, how to respond, what you can do to prevent it. Hopefully, by doing that, we're going to avoid any problems. It's not an excuse for, if you're worried about what might happen, don't go outside your door in the morning, because you might get run over by a car. Okay. We can't live our life around what might happen. Even in this day of terrorism and all the issues that can happen, your life can't revolve around what might happen. You have to go ahead and live your life and enjoy yourself. Preparation and awareness are the key to avoiding any kind of trouble. If you're aware that it can happen, hopefully you'll have a heads up as to be looking for the possibility of something happen and be ready to deal with it in the event that it does. Prevention is the most effective means of caring for your pet. We don't want to close the barn door after the horse is out. Okay, we want to try to prevent things. The vast majority of you are probably going to cruise for years and never have any significant issue with your pet, so don't worry about it. Again, here are my books. Where There Is No Pet Doctor, it's available on my website here at www.captaindrdave.com. It is an excellent book for those of you who are going to do anything significantly long duration in a wilderness location, but it's probably not necessary for those of you who are doing routine week-long cruises on a river or a lake scenario. Pets on board might be of use to you if you're trying to get your pet adjusted and adapted to being on board. It gives some advice. island hopping to the Caribbean, if there are any of you have had the dream, as Annie and I did, of taking your boat and sailing out of the inland waterways and down the coast and down to the Caribbean and living the dream, so to speak, we did it. Okay, we lived aboard our boat for 4 years in Baltimore Harbor. We lived and then headed down the ICW, crossed over to the Bahamas, and sailed down to the Caribbean, where we spent another 4 years living aboard. This kind of book kind of tells a little bit of a narrative about, what we did, what we enjoyed, what we would do differently. It also gives some recommended references. It's certainly not a how-to book. It doesn't tell you how to do it. It just tells you what we did. You can go to my website of the same name, islandhoppingtothecaribbean.com, and get more information. I have a blog there that you can read, along with a some video information or access to some videos on the topic. If you've ever dreamed of doing this with your boat, yes, it can be done. I'm here to tell you that it can. So if you're interested in that, check it out. The book's available on my website. It's on this website. It's on my Island Hopping to the Caribbean website, and it's also available on Amazon.com. So if you are interested in any of these, here are my books and my videos. There's a video that goes with my veterinary care for your dog and veterinary care for your cat that goes with the Where There Is No Pet Doctor book. Allows you to see some of the things done that you might need to do. And that's about it. So enjoy. The discounts here are no longer applicable. There's still a discount. It's just not as much as what's listed here. If you go through my website, you'll be eligible for that. Thank you for your time and attention, and happy sales.